The Gospels place a lot of weight on the last week of Jesus' life. Though the bulk of his ministry took place in and around the region of the Galilee, over what we guess was about a 3-year period, fully a third or more of each Gospel centers on the drama that ensues when he arrives in Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. This week, I want us to follow Jesus through this all-important week at the end of his human life. But I'll have to be pretty selective in my choice of stories because there's just too much going on to try to cover everything that happens within the confines of these brief devotionals. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Monday, April 3rd, 2023. The Synoptic Gospels pretty much tip us off right away that this week will be one filled with controversy and confrontation. They all tell the story of the cleansing of the temple as the first thing that happens when Jesus rides into town. Mark tells us that he went into the temple and then went home since it was late in the day, while Matthew and Luke place it immediately upon his entry into the city. But again, I'm not all that worried about this kind of discrepancy in detail. It's the larger narrative arc that I'm concerned about. After the cleansing of the temple, we have a curious event in which Jesus curses a fig tree. For the more literal-minded among us, this is really curious. After all, the springtime was not when fig trees bore fruit. So let's listen in as Matthew tells us this story. In the morning, when he returned to the city, he was hungry. And seeing a fig tree by the side of the road, he went to it and found nothing at all on it but leaves. Then he said to it, "May no fruit ever come from you again." And the fig tree withered at once. When the disciples saw it, they were amazed, saying, "How did the fig tree wither at once?" Jesus answered them, "Truly I tell you, if you have faith and do not doubt, not only will you do what has been done to the fig tree, but even if you say to this mountain, 'Be lifted up and thrown into the sea,' it will be done. Whatever you ask for in prayer with faith, you will receive." Jesus was a man who understood the agricultural cycles. He knew when it was time to plant and when it was time to reap. He used agricultural points to illustrate various points he wanted to make in his ministry. Given his knowledge of the cycles of agriculture, he would have known that no fig tree would have had figs yet. It was simply too early in the year. So, what gives? The answer is simple and straightforward. This isn't a story about figs. This isn't a story about a petulant Jesus taking out his anger and frustration on a defenseless fig tree that could not have been expected to bear fruit at that time of year. No, this is a story not about figs, but about faith and faithfulness. One of the hallmarks of many of the prophets of the Old Testament is that they did what you might call sign acts. These are actions they took that symbolized something else as part of their message. For example, Hosea took as his wife a prostitute named Gomer, who continued to lie with other men. This was to symbolize the marriage bond between God and Israel, a bond that was continually broken by the unfaithfulness of Israel, which continued to worship other gods besides the Lord. Jesus is using the fig tree as a sign act to make a point about the faithlessness of Israel in his day. Like a fig tree in spring, it had all the regular signs of life, but it failed to produce the kind of fruit God wanted from them. For example, instead of concern for the poor, the authorities showed more concern with the outward appearance of obedience to the law than with its inner meaning. The prophet Micah also used the fig tree to illustrate the lack of faithfulness on the part of Judah, the southern kingdom. He says, "Woe is me! For I have become like one who, after the summer fruit has been gathered, after the vintage has been gleaned, finds no cluster to eat. There is no first ripe fig for which I hunger. The faithful have disappeared from the land, and there is no one left who is upright. They all lie in wait for blood, and they hunt each other with nets. Their hands are skilled to do evil. The official and the judge ask for a bribe, and the powerful dictate what they desire. Thus they pervert justice. The best of them is like a briar, the most upright of them a thorn hedge. The day of their sentence, of their punishment has come. Now their confusion is at hand. So what Jesus is doing here is calling to mind what the prophets before have already spoken about God's people, that their outward forms of religion are more about show than about substance, and even the best among them were found lacking. This is a powerful message for Jesus to say as he begins this most important week. And don't think for a minute the religious authorities missed the point. Tomorrow, Jesus tells two pointed stories aimed right at the authorities in Jerusalem. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.